up dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you're joining me, whether watching me live tonight when we go out every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central, live on Facebook and on X, and of course on YouTube, or whether you're watching one of those shows archived after the date we've gone out, or listening to us, just the audio version of the show on one of the many podcast platforms that this show and all the other wonderful shows on the Untold Radio Network go out on. And if you're a first-time listener, greetings. And I hope you become one of the weird club here. There's a chat. The chat's always super active, so jump in there and say hello. I've got a little bit of a cold, as you can probably tell, so if I mute my microphone instead of coughing in your ears occasionally, I'm sure you won't even notice, because our guest tonight is wonderful, and he'll be able to fill all those holes where I'm coughing up a lung, so to speak. I've also been busy with fest work. I've just finally wrapped A Night of Horror International Film Festival and MidWest WeirdFest, which ran a little over 2 weeks ago now in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, at the Icon Downtown Cinema. In fact, tonight's guest is somebody who was at that festival, which I'll get to when I hit the introduction in a minute. I also like to fill you all in on my own film, at the moment, which is The Shaver Mystery, which is a short film, an extract, really a standalone segment from my upcoming feature, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, about Ray Palmer, Richard Shaver, The Shaver Mystery, and the creation of UFO belief. And anybody in New York City, I would encourage you so much to get to the PK Dick Festival, the Philip K. Dick Film Festival in New York City, which kicks off in the first week of April. The Shaver Mystery is playing there on the Friday at the Producers Club. They have a number of different cinema venues there. It looks like an incredible festival. It has cosplay parties this year. The fest has been going now for, I think, about a dozen years. It's one of America's most important science fiction film festivals. And if you're anywhere near New York, I would encourage you to get to that festival and support it, because it's an amazing event, and I'm honored to have The Shaver Mystery screening there. But speaking of film, tonight's guest is a filmmaker. He's a photographer, a videographer, and a certified drone pilot based in Madison, Wisconsin. He hosts the YouTube channel Alien Wisconsin, which is excellent. I suggest you check that out. I will have the address in the show notes, or you can just go on YouTube and look up Alien Wisconsin. You'll find it pretty easily. And there he explores UFO phenomena through in-depth interviews focusing on how these extraordinary experiences transform people's lives. One of his films, The Sky, the Canvas, and Eau Claire, just won a major award at the 9th Annual MidWest WeirdFest, which I mentioned previously. And that short's just this engrossing news piece which deals with the profound impact a childhood UFO encounter had on a local artist. So I am beyond delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird, Ian Stephen.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Dean, for having me back. I really appreciate it. Your audience is great and your show is amazing. So I'm really honored to be here.
Man, I'm just so glad to be able to chat to you again, because the festival was so chaotic. I got to talk to you a little bit there, but I'm running around like a March hare, which is appropriate considering it's in March, or like a chicken with my head cut off. I'm not sure what, but I didn't get to hang out with you anywhere near as much as I wanted to. But maybe you can fill the audience in a little bit more about that film, because they can see it online as well. Like, it's up on Alien Wisconsin now. So maybe tell people a little bit about that and how you made that. Maybe that's a good jumping off point.
Sure. I mean, that film basically was an adapted episode of Alien Wisconsin that was slightly changed for the film festival. I had actually not even considered film festivals as something I could even do until I spoke with you about it. And it really kind of like awakened me to, wait, I can do this too. In some ways I started Alien Wisconsin as a way to just practice my videography skills. But also, just moving from being a photographer to more a videographer. And the phenomena is something I've been extremely interested in. And it's very hard to cover it in a unique way. So what I've kind of approached it as is, the local side of it, working on people in Wisconsin. And there's still so many incredible stories in Wisconsin. That film got made just because I reached out on one of the Facebook groups, and I was lucky enough to connect with Audrey, who was this artist who told me she had this incredible story and was finally ready to tell it after like 50 years or something like that, or like 45 years or something. I'm trying to remember the exact dates in my head, but and so I met her out of the blue, and she's extremely charismatic. She's exactly like she looks on camera. Like, she's a fun, warm person who's creative, and she's a painter. And she had this experience that really kind of changed her in a lot of ways. And I think she tried to kind of repress it for a while, and then she just couldn't. At some point, she was compelled to paint it. And so she started painting it, and she just, did these rich colors. We might be having some stream issues, but she was doing these rich colors, and she put together this.
No, I'm here, and I just put you full screen because you were telling a story, and it's more interesting for the audience to look at you than my other.
And so she tells her story about how, she's 16 and she's coming home from her friends, and she's walking in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and suddenly there is a flying saucer that starts following her, and it starts humming, and all the dogs in the neighborhood start barking, and she starts walking fast because she thinks if she starts running that it's going to get her. Like, for some reason, like, that's her logic. And I love that. And that's basically what the piece focuses on. There's a few more twists and turns. I'm not going to give it away completely, but that's basically the story. And I think because of her personality and how genuine she seems and how it changes her in a positive way, that's what makes the piece work. That it's not a scare thing and it's not too cerebral for people. I think this is one of the problems that those of us who really kind of study the phenomena have, is that it just gets too complicated and too cerebral. And I'm not trying to oversimplify things, but rather recognize that there are different people in the audience at different experience levels, and we have to kind of make content at different tiers for people. Not everything can be, you have read your 500th UFO book. There needs to be something for someone who's, on their second book or their first, and that's kind of like where this is kind of like a lower, easier to understand story in that regard.
No, I like that. I like that so much of your content focuses on the experiences, stories themselves. And Paul Burzo, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Paul says, sounds interesting. How can we watch this? And he's talking about the sky, the canvas in Eau Claire.
The latest episode of Alien Wisconsin has a discussion of the film festival, and the film is actually right in the middle of it. So it is already on YouTube. So if Paul is to go out there and look for it, it will be the latest episode. And it has me like holding a trophy. The AI helped me. I changed my camera into a trophy, the miracle of AI. So that's what the thumbnail is on YouTube if you're looking for it. So it's right in there. I might end up posting it separately too, just so people can have a direct link.
Yeah, it's really worth watching. I think that it's a piece that you should be entering to additional flying saucer. Or Midwest WeirdFest isn't a flying saucer orientated festival, although it loves UFO content, obviously. But there's lots of paranormal orientated festivals, and there's some which are specifically UFO orientated.
I'm actually already in the process of looking at another UFO festival in Denmark that I'm going to be entering one or two pieces in, I think. And I think this one, it will be entered in again. And as well as a story about a woman in Viroqua who sees a UFO with her entire family in the car. So that's kind of an interesting story as well. That one's a little bit different because you don't usually get a whole family of witnesses. And so that one's we can talk about that one another day perhaps. But, like these things do happen even in Wisconsin. I know everyone thinks it's all just cheese. I mean, I have the cheese head behind me if you look, but we have interesting stuff happening here too. So.
Yeah, I just shared a link the other day from Bram Rosa. Bram made a wonderful feature documentary called The UFOs over Soesterberg, which we screened at, I think, Midwest WeirdFest last year, the year before you screened there, and it won Best Documentary. And he's started a festival in, I think it's based out of, I should know. Is it based out of? Anyway. It's somewhere in Europe, and it's called the Unidentified and Anomalous Pictures International Film Festival.
That would something worth checking out.
Yeah, I'll send you a link later. But if there's any other UFO filmmakers out there, this is their first year. But Bram's a great guy, and I think that if you're making films in this kind of area that both you and I are interested in, they can find it easily on Film Freeway, which again is called the Unidentified and Anomalous Pictures International Film Festival. So
I'd also like to say that this was the first time I've ever entered a film festival, and your film festival was so much fun and everyone was so friendly and it was just a great time. I didn't really have any expectations of it. I was actually a little nervous. I didn't know if people even like booed or not. I had no idea what was going to happen. Like I just had no clue, and I had a great time. And I would recommend, if anyone has been filming something, and you're thinking, can I enter a film festival? You should do it. You should give it a shot. And even if you don't make it in, it's still a wonderful learning experience for anyone.
And actually, Midwest WeirdFest submissions are open again for 2026 now. So I was plugging another fest, but we certainly love flying saucer and paranormal content as well. And festivals are a wonderful place. I mean, I'm obviously saying this as somebody who runs them and somebody who loves to screen my own content at them, but we live in this space now where people watch content on phones and on laptops. I'm even guilty of watching things on my laptop, right? Everybody
Sure.
watches alone, everybody binges stuff by themselves, but there's a different experience for both the audience and the filmmaker. Like as you were describing then, when you go to an event and you have a full house like your session did, there's 100 people in the audience and you're sitting there experiencing, whether as an audience member, the film that's screening, or whether you were there as the filmmaker gauging the audience's reaction to your movie. That's not a phenomenon that, an experience that's as anomalous as seeing a UFO, really. It's not even what you get when you go to the Cineplex these days. There's no filmmaker introducing at the Cineplex. You're not
Oh
sitting in the
yeah.
same audience as the filmmaker.
I mean, it's incredible. So you go out and you introduce your film to other people who love movies and they love the paranormal. They're not there, as far as I know, they're not there on a date trying to get lucky. They're there because they love film and they love the weird, right? And so they're there and they're an audience that is just ready for this kind of thing. They are attentive. They don't have their phones out and scrolling through. There's not a dog barking. The kids aren't in the other room. Like they're there to watch your film. They're going to like be honest with you. And if they clap, they really mean it. So it kind of feels more, almost more special when you're in front of that audience. And there is something kind of magical about having your film on a big screen. Like it is really exciting because you're like, I mean, I edit mine on a small MacBook Pro, and then seeing it on a movie theater, it's just a completely novel experience. It's just wonderful. And I can't recommend it enough for people. I'm definitely already hooked.
I'm glad I was like the dealer, behind the bathroom in somewhere going, "Hey, come over here, got something for you."
I was like, "Are you sure I can do this?" You're like, "Yeah, you can do it. You can edit it."
Well, it's true, man. Your content is amazing. So let's talk about let's leave the film fest stuff behind us now.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of your other content though. Let's talk about some of your experiences when you've been out there in the world, not even necessarily anomalous, but when you approach people, and we'll get to some of your anomalous experiences or one of them in a minute. I'm losing my voice a little bit, but talk about approaching UFO experiences. Talk about how you find them, how you decide to approach them, because it's got to be a touchy kind of subject matter, talking to people about these private experiences that they've had.
Yeah, it's very much a difficult experience. Like, I mean, I went to school for photojournalism, and so I'm kind of used to having these kind of discussions with people like, hey, can I take your photo? I know no one wants their photo taken, especially if it's in relation to something that's difficult or painful. But I'm used to having that, but it's also an extra level of difficulty when you're talking about the paranormal, because there is still stigma, even though as much as things have gotten better, and they have, it's still not completely gone. And I have a story about that too, but, I have a lot of people who will tell me their story on the phone. They'll tell me their story like through direct messages, but they will not go on camera. And it's really frustrating. And I think, maybe if I'm nice enough, if I get them to, and, just some people just won't budge. And you know what? I will circle back with them in 6 months and ask again. I think that's all you can do. But thankfully, some people still have come forward. And, one thing I don't let people do is, use a fake name or hide their face. It's because I don't think there's any shame in seeing a UFO or sharing your experience. And so I'm not hiding anything. And if you don't feel comfortable, I understand that. Well, then I probably won't film you. No offense. It's just like, I don't see there's any reason to hide about this kind of thing, in regards to like, I mean, I mostly have been using kind of paranormal groups in the Wisconsin area. A lot of people have seen things that just are now becoming more comfortable enough to start talking about it. And so that's kind of like, that's been where I've been getting my leads. Not everyone I film actually ends up making it into an episode because, I mean, not everyone's good on camera, or their story just is confusing, or sometimes it's happened once where I wasn't even sure it happened. And I hate to say that, but like, I'm not going to bother my audience with something that I'm like, I don't know if this person just wants attention or that's only happened once, but like it can happen. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
yeah, it must be difficult then to make that determination. And then the person's probably calling you saying, When's my episode going to air on Alien Wisconsin?
It is difficult. It's also, there's a lot of challenges with these kind of representing things. Is like, how much of the story do you want to tell? Because sometimes they will tell you other stories that are related or not related or sort of related, that kind of like speak to their character as a person. Like, what if they've had mental health issues? And by the way, when I bring up these examples, they aren't me like straw manning something. This has all actually already happened to me. So like, I'm not making this up to be like, be rude to these people. But, I'm always afraid of platforming people who've had mental health issues, because I'm afraid of the comment section and people harassing them. You kind of also have to protect the people you're representing. Like, you're not trying to throw these people to the wolves. They have entrusted you with telling their stories, so you have a duty of care. At least I think so. You don't want them to just, be attacked online, because people can be quite mean.
You've always seemed somebody to me who's been super respectful regarding UFO witnesses and experiences, and that certainly comes across, I think, in everything I've watched on Alien Wisconsin, which again is an excellent UFO channel. We have a question here from Stone Picker. What about generational abductions? Have you talked about that?
I haven't specifically talked about it on my channel. I have actually been in touch with two different experiencers, one who's had generational abductions, and one who may have. It's kind of unclear on the second one. I have not specifically talked about it yet. It's a harder topic to kind of broach, because my content tends to be easier to be for people who are kind of beginning, and I think that the experiencer conversation is complicated. I do want to start talking about it, and especially, I guess I haven't quite figured out how to tell the story yet, but I want to talk about how there are severe health issues for people who are experiencers. And I don't mean that, I mean that in a broad sense. For example, if you think that you've been abducted by aliens, or you think that you have an implant in your body, how do you go about actually accessing medical care? And it can be psychological care, and it can be just getting scans and things like that done, because your insurance most likely will not cover this. You're not going to go in there and say, will you please do an MRI? I think an alien put a piece of metal in my wrist. Now, I mean, whether that's true or not, there's a lot of challenges for these people one way or another. Now, someone may, like in one of the stories I've kind of started on, is they have had mental health issues, and whether the encounters happened or not, the trauma is real. That I can say. I can't attest to did it actually happen, but what I can attest to is they believe it, and they are reacting to the trauma. So how does that person who is dealing with real mental health issues get help in a way that doesn't mock them, in a way that is helpful and treats them fairly? And the good news is there's actually, I just read about this a few weeks ago. I believe in the United Kingdom, there's a new organization that's going to start advocating for medical care for people who are experiencers. So I was kind of excited to read that, and I'm hoping to reach out to them. I just haven't had time yet. So that's on the docket.
That is super interesting. That's something I want to go and Google as soon as I've finished this episode. I do think that, and I could rant about this all night, and I won't, because I want to talk to you instead, but I do think that historically we were more comfortable with people who'd had experiences with the other, and many people who were in the shamanistic traditions in the past today would be dismissed as mentally unwell because they were talking to things that didn't seem to be there. And certainly my own work with, you've seen the Shaver Mystery.
Yeah.
When I first met you at Milwaukee Paracon, there certainly seems to be, with Richard Shaver, for example, this suggestion that he was mentally unwell, and that's why he had those experiences. But even after he'd been in and out of institutions and then seemed to operate totally fine in society for the next 30, 40 years of his life, he still asserted that these experiences were real, and he said that he had more of them. And I think maybe that line between what we consider mental illness and what is a numinous experience, or an experience with the other, might in some ways almost point the direction that some researchers, well, maybe all of us, but it's difficult to say everybody should look in that direction, but that some of us should look in. Maybe there is something about the interaction with our own minds with the other, which becomes traumatic. So it's almost like a chicken and an egg. What happens first? Is the person mentally unwell and then they have these experiences, or are the experiences themselves so traumatic that, you know, something happens psychologically? I don't know. Anyway, that's just me.
Well,
throwing that out.
I'd like to add one final thing too that's particularly pernicious when we talk about this subject and we try to talk about it with some seriousness. Many people who experience anything with the paranormal, whether it's just, you know, maybe they think they have seen a ghost, or maybe is something as advanced as they believe they've been abducted by aliens, or whatever the case may be. Many of these people self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. And so they are immediately dismissed because people are like, well, you know, that person drinks, or you know, that person uses drugs. But is the person using drugs or drinking because of the trauma, or you know, like, which happened first?
Good point.
And so I think we have to really kind of look at that as well. Do we want to just completely dismiss someone because after that traumatic event, they became an alcoholic? I would like to think we won't do that, but I don't know if people have that discipline or not. So,
yeah, I think the subjectivity of experience, just in general, I'm not just even talking about anomalous experiences, but just
Sure.
the way you and I might be at a party and have an engagement with somebody else and have a totally different idea of what that encounter meant, for example. I think because experience is so subjective, but then when we push into the anomalous, it becomes quadruply or maybe by 10 as subjective. I think it becomes so difficult to it becomes very difficult for the modern mind to nail any of this stuff down. So then it's very easy to do the throwaway, well, the person's ill, or the person has a drinking thing, or the person, you know, is whatever. I just think that we're trapped today we're trapped in a very modernistic way of looking at things being either true or false, or physical or spiritual, or black or white. And I don't think our forebears who had encounters with the other had to box these things so neatly. Like a fairy could be both physical and belong to another realm, and it could both engage you but tell you lies and show you things that tricked you. Like there used to be an understanding of the subjectivity of experience, but today we don't seem to be. We're not a very understanding culture anymore, period, right? But B, when it comes to the anomalous, I don't think people really. I think all of the sympathy goes out the door altogether. You're forced to either believe it or not believe it, and it's a problem, I think.
I mean, it's also even difficult for people like myself because, like, I mean, my standards of evidence, I try to be maybe too high, and it's kind of like you have to kind of watch yourself because you could easily be dismissing something that is true. So it's challenging. It's genuinely challenging, kind of threading that like, what is something that you can tell as a story that your audience will accept. Like, that's kind of a challenge in and of itself, if you think about it.
Talk to me about something you teased a little bit before in messages about you when investigating might be the wrong term, when you were examining or when you were interviewing somebody and you were with them, somebody who had ongoing contacts, that maybe you had an anomalous experience when you were documenting that.
Yeah. So this is a project I've been working on for a while, is the CE5 phenomena, which for those who may not know, it's called the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Famously, you know, we have the Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The fifth kind is you initiate contact with, I'm just going to say aliens or extraterrestrial, even though that's not an accurate term. I'll just say that. And you initiate the contact. So this has been a growing movement over the last maybe 5 years. It's really picked up a lot of steam, and people get together, typically in rural locations, not always, and they meditate as a group. And they believe that through these meditations that they can make a UFO or an alien being appear in some capacity. This was kind of championed by a documentary by Dr. Stephen Greer, a very contentious figure in the ufology movement in general. But anyways, I had found out that there was a man in Wisconsin who was doing this, and he was having all these people come over to his rural location. And I kind of found him, I don't even know, like just in a UFO group, and he seemed really friendly and a little bit weird, which I mean, like, you know, doesn't really put me off, but I mean, I'm sure it puts most people off. He's kind of like if you could mix a redneck and a druid together. And I think he would probably appreciate that. I really like him as a human. I think he has probably even described himself that way to me. And so I started seeing him, like I do go to many of the UFO events and the paranormal events that I can hit up within about 90 miles of my house. And I just kept seeing him at different events. And I kept drilling him and asking him question after question, trying to like probe and see if like what his intentions were, if he was, you know, charging people money, if this was for fame. And he was always honest and sincere, and his answers never changed. So eventually I go with my producer and we go to a CE5 event in very rural Wisconsin. And this was last year. To give you an idea how rural it was 27 minutes to a grocery store. There was like wolves, and we saw bald eagles while we were driving there. And there's just nothing. There's no city. There's no lights. There's nothing. And I want to pause this by saying something important that seems unrelated. But at this point, I had been studying again for my reauthorization of my professional drone license. So I had been cramming my FAA books. I had been reading about drones because I'm like, I just don't want to fail. It's a matter of pride too. You don't want to do well in these tests. And so, you know, we're filming, we do the meditation. We listen to Dr. Stephen Greer's meditation, and we meditate for a while. And it's a beautiful night, but it's very, very cold. And I brought a blanket, but I have to give it to my producer because she gets really cold and she's just freezing. And then we, start a campfire, and that helps for a while. And it's been like 3.5 hours. And like, she gives me the look like, we need to go because it's already 3.5 hours. And at this point, I'd put my camera away, which I know this is why I don't like to talk about this story. It's because it's like, it is actually true that people who are filming do put their gear away. It does happen. Right. Like, I mean, we don't have infinite batteries and infinite memory cards. And we do get cold as well. So we're about ready to leave, and this thing appears, and it's a triangle. It's 3 green lights in the sky in a triangular pattern, and it kind of twirls in like almost like a fidget spinner, if you know what that is. Like those kind of, and it kind of twirls in. And my producer, she says, "What's that?" And the CE5 guy, who I haven't named who he is, the CE5 guy grabs a laser pointer. And this is, I guess, common practice in the CE5 community, is they will try to signal the crafts that they've summoned, if they are in fact crafts, whatever they are. But my producer says, no, it might be a plane or something. And so he points the laser pointer at it. And it seems like it's relatively close. But as he's pointing the laser pointer at it, it dodges the laser pointer. It like twirls around it like a cartwheel. And then I look at it and go, how? Because, I've been studying for my drones. I think to myself, how is it flying so fast? I can't even dream of getting my drone to fly that fast. And then he's like, oh, it dodged it. And then he points the laser pointer at it again, and it twirls around it again, just like effortlessly, like it was no big deal at all. And it's doing this all silently. It's silently moving. And it seems like relatively large. It's very hard to get the exact approximation in a night sky, because there's a few optical illusions that happen at night when you're trying to like size up something in the sky. So it does seem like if it was a drone, it would have been a very large drone, and it would have been very, very fast. And then it just flies away doing these like cartwheels, and it just is gone. And the whole thing was like 15 seconds. And I was like many people, instead of thinking, oh, this is a UFO, I just kept thinking, how did the drone fly so fast? It was like my brain was like locked on this other thing. Like I couldn't even allow myself to think of it like that. And then my producer, she's like, that wasn't a flying saucer. And I was like, no, it wasn't. It was a triangle. And we talked like this for like an hour and a half in the car ride back. It's like, well, that's not the right shape for a UFO, is it? And like there was this kind of aura of doubt for the whole time. But after like going over all of my drone work again, and I realized that if it was a drone, it broke every law in the book. You're not supposed to fly at night like this when there's nothing to photograph. It's also dangerous because flying at night where there's no lights means that you can get eaten by a tree. You could fall on something. It's genuinely unidentified is all I can say. And it was a very weird experience. And if it was what we summoned, it was, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, I wish I could just say it was a drone or it was a UFO, but it leaves you with so much doubt, because even someone like myself who is public facing like this, I don't want to claim it was something it wasn't, because I would feel really embarrassed, I think, if I found out it was, it really just was a drone. But on the other hand, it did happen. I don't know what it precisely was. And it was very eye-opening to have like a similar experience happen to me. And it makes me wonder if, there is something to CE5. I think I kind of went into it thinking that there's just absolutely no way that people meditating in the woods could summon a UFO. That just seemed like the craziest thing I'd ever heard in my whole life. And I kind of was hoping that I would be easy to disprove. But now I'm in the, position of thinking, well, maybe there is. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can just tell you what happened and you can draw your own conclusions. So.
Wow, what a fascinating story. We have a question from, and I have some questions for you as well in a minute, but we have a question from Lee Warner, who's, I believe, a channel member. Thank you, Lee. And Lee asks, is this by the Dells? In other words, the Wisconsin Dells, for those who don't live in this state.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. That's correct. I think it's closer to like 45 minutes from it, but yeah, it's in that general area.
Okay. To me, CE5, I mean, I think some of the Greer stuff's great, by the way. I think some of Greer's documentaries and Greer's suggestions that much of what we see and much of what we're told through various governmental leaks is just disinformation about their own technology. Like, I'm all on board. I'm all with Greer 100% when that side of what Greer talks about. And some of his documentaries are worth watching just for that, to be honest. But Greer's meditation and Greer's flashing lights into the sky, I'm somebody who doesn't, I'm probably not as kind and as accepting of the scientific method as most people are today. But so I don't dismiss it because it sounds like woo-woo mumbo jumbo. To me, what it does is I go, this sounds like spiritualism in the past. This just sounds like you have modern technological, equipment, but you're doing the same thing that people used to do when they did table tapping or when they talked to ghosts in the spiritualist movement in the 19th century. You're making yourself receptive to another intelligence. You're sending signals which are fairly, dot, 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 easy type signals to send out and to get responses from, flashing lights or knocking on tables or anything else. So to me, then I start to put a lot of the CE5 phenomenon within an older tradition, a tradition of contacting the spiritual world. To be honest, that's when I hear these things about CE5, I think that just sounds to me like a modern version of what people have been doing for centuries.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most difficult things to approach once you have been studying UFOs for a while, is that eventually you want it to be a really simple story. You kind of go into it thinking there's these flying saucers, there's these grays. And then the government is not telling people because either they're dangerous or it would scare people. And you want to think that's the whole story. But that story is way too convenient and way too simple. The phenomena itself is just much more complicated, it seems. And there is this element of whether we call it psychic or whether we call it spiritual or whether we call it mental or perception or consciousness. I mean, all of these are very heavily weighted words, and that's what makes it really challenging to discuss it, because I don't think any of those words are quite correct, but maybe we don't have the right word for it yet. There seems to be all of these like kind of like weigh on the experience. There is elements of communication, and is that telepathic, or is it just an advanced machine that's reading a brainwave? I have no idea what's actually happening in a lot of this space, but eventually you will have to kind of talk about the psychic spiritual consciousness component of the phenomena, and it makes people uncomfortable and they don't want to hear about it. But it just keeps coming up in very reliable ways from people who are good actors, who I've, really tried to parse and try to figure out, is this person lying to me? These people all believe that there is an element of, as I said, psychic spiritual consciousness in the phenomena. And it's definitely going to be probably the hardest part to kind of, if there ever is a great disclosure, it's just kind of getting that part out. That will be the real challenging part.
Yeah, it's so difficult because there's so many people with opinions and so many people who think they know what this is. I think you have a very open approach to it, and I do think that it's important to recognize that this does have something to do with us. It does have something to do with our human consciousness, whether it's a psychological or a sociological process, or whether it's the other is somehow connecting with us and co-creating this phenomenon, the way that Greg Bishop suggested in his wonderful piece in the late Robbie Graham's UFOs Reframing the Debate. But it seems like we're connected to the phenomenon, and it might be that it's extraterrestrial and somehow they're plugging into us. I mean, it's as good an explanation as any. But I think that I do think that there are segments of ufology that go back to the very beginning that are very reluctant to look at some of these stranger aspects of the phenomenon. And I think it's ironic now that there is this, it's not that it's being accepted necessarily, but there is this resurgence in things like CE5. But the contactees of the 1950s, people like George Adamski, for example, were pretty much poo-pooed by all of mainstream nuts and bolts ufology. But today there does seem to be this weird opening, and maybe that's something we can talk about now, because I know we're going to segue into some modern UFO news, but I might have mentioned it last time you were on here. One of the things I've been fascinated about with the way the disclosure movement, for lack of a better term, has been going, is that a lot of the heavy hitters in that space, from Tom DeLonge through Leslie Keane, and I'm talking about people actually disclosing as well as the media around it. So Leslie Keane, David Grush, Tucker Carlson. Yeah. So many of these people are saying this is something which isn't extraterrestrial. They suggest it's spiritual, or it's interdimensional, or it's something else. But a lot of that seems to have been lost, I think, on the more mainstream ufology, the idea that this might not be ET. But we've heard a number of people in that kind of space now say this is something, but it's not ET. I don't know what your take is on that, or if we can segue that into modern UFO news.
Yeah, I mean, sure I can. Not a problem at all. So
throwing you under the bus a little bit there. You're good at this stuff.
My personal take is I don't like saying alien or extraterrestrial. I think they're imprecise words, and they also kind of close your mind to other possibilities, which is basically exactly what David Grush, who you just mentioned, said at the first UFO hearing, not this year, but in 2024. So last year's UFO hearing, he was the one that really pounded the drum on saying non-human intelligence. Non-human intelligence opens the door to, for example, just something as simple as this, is the things that are visiting us are just autopilot AIs. There's not even anything living on there. That would be a non-human. It would still be an intelligent, it's not just like a weather phenomena. It's some intelligence, but it's non-human. I mean, I know people really hate that when you tell them it might just be a machine. They really get upset. They want it to be, a spooky monster. But I'm like, we have Siri and Alexa and ChatGPT. It doesn't really surprise me if that was the case on one of these. But still talking about David Grush. So we need to talk about one of the biggest pieces of UFO news that's happened in a very long time is there was a lot of hope, an enormous amount of hope for people in the UFO community about the Trump administration. Now, why is that? It's not because they're all conservative Republicans. That's actually not the case at all. They were really excited because during the last election year, the Republicans actually spoke about UFOs and the Democrats basically didn't. And it was the first time any political party has ever talked about it in the mainstream discourse, ever. First, I did a whole episode on this, by the way. It's on Alien Wisconsin. It's the one where there's like a Democrat and a Republican mascot like pointing at each other on a UFO. But it's really kind of an interesting political historical piece. And so there was a lot of excitement because they were talking the talk. But historically speaking, at least in modern history, the Democrats have actually passed legislation on UFOs, and the Republicans just mostly talk about it. Which is, like, could we have the best of both worlds? Could we have a party that does both? But so we have Donald Trump goes on multiple segments right before the election claiming that he will declassify some more UFO files. And he actually tells us in January before he signed in that he's going to talk about the drone phenomena, which many of us in the community believe are some of the drones that are closing down military bases and swarming them may actually be non-human. It's at least a possibility. And Donald Trump claimed he knew what it was going to tell us what it was. Well, he comes out and his press secretary basically lies about it. Like, it was the biggest slap in the face. It was a big crestfallen moment for the UFO community. They said, oh, the FAA knew it was a drone. It was some random pilots. Well, I mean, that's just absolutely, completely impossible once you review the facts. And 60 Minutes just did a long piece about it in the last week and a half ago about, confirming at the highest levels in the military that this was not the FAA forgot that they were doing an experiment. And it was a few random drone pilots that were, evading the FBI, the FAA, and the state and local law enforcement. Just these scrappy people were able to, do all that. So then what happens is everybody's kind of disappointed. And Anna Paula Luna, God bless her heart, she's been on 2 UFO, the UFO hearings. She comes out and says that on Twitter, she starts teasing this. She's going to do something big. And she's like, she's teasing it in such a way that the UFO people know she's talking to us. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, she comes out with the task force. I wrote it down because it's a stupid name. The Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets. So she claims it's going to be a bipartisan commission that is going to declassify all of the secrets. So I'm watching this press conference, and it's just her and this other senior Republican. And like she says that she's going to tell us what the Epstein files are. She's going to tell us about John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, MLK, the actual origins of COVID, 9/11, UFOs, and USOs, which are unidentified submersible objects. And bringing up USOs means that she's pretty much into the culture, because most people don't even know what USO is. So like the fact that she brings it up is kind of exciting. So at first everyone's very excited. And then I start thinking about it for a moment, and I think, why would you have a junior congressperson with one other person on stage tackling such weighty issues? I mean, if you look at these issues, they're just gigantic, all of them. There's just no way that's going to be enough people. Eventually, she gets a few more people. And this last week, evidently, David Grush is going to be joining the committee in some capacity in an advisory role, which is kind of exciting. So, I mean, we're excited that there's formally going to be somewhat of an inquest in this. And it finally have been some Democrats that signed on. It's really important that it's bipartisan and not just, Republicans. But what I'm not seeing is I'm not seeing the heavy hitters that I would expect. If someone was really working on these secrets with seriousness, you would expect to see, generals on stage. You would expect to see, 20, 30, 40 Congress people being like, we're going to get to the bottom of these things, if there was a true, honest effort to do so. So, I mean, it's exciting that they're at least talking about it, but I'm very skeptical that that they have the ability or the clearance to even do this, or even the man hours to do this. This is a lot of work to kind of disclose these kind of secrets. So we'll see. I mean, that was kind of the big news this last week and a half was David Grush getting on there.
What's your gut instinct on Grush?
I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good guy. I think he's real. I think he's real. I think that he's trying. And I think I think people want all of these people to be saints, and that's just not going to be the case. I think he's one of the best people we have. You know, speaking about the declassification group, the very night that Anna Paula Luna gets up there and she talks about this, I get into a Twitter Spaces, which is kind of like a chat room where people like talk. It's a voice chat room. And there is a like pull out every dirty secret you could ever pull out on Anna Paula Luna. Like find out who she is. And I mean, yeah, she has a little bit of a past. And they made sure that everyone was aware of it, that she modeled and that she may have danced. That part's a little bit, maybe she did. She's in a police report where it seems to indicate she did. Her family had a drug problem and she escaped it by going to the military. She changed her last name to sound more Hispanic to appeal to Hispanic voters. But I mean, like they just dredged this woman. It was kind of crazy. And I don't think anything that was revealed was really all that, important or disqualifying in any way, shape, or form. It's just that it was interesting to see that was kind of already instantly happening on Twitter as soon as she said she was going to work on these kind of secret events. So there really is opposition to finding the truth, and I just don't know really why we're so afraid of it. It's society will not fall apart if we find out who went to the Epstein Island. And then now everyone is focusing on, of course, the big name, which is Kennedy. Kennedy is kind of part of this. There's been about 80,000 pages that were supposedly disclosed. It seems like the actual number's lower because some of them have been redisclosed. There's been a lot of talk about that in the news. And why does that matter by the way, I'm not going to answer the Kennedy questions just because I'm not qualified for it. But I will say that it's being seen as a bellwether for UFO disclosure. If the public can find out and accept some harsh truth that, someone else was involved or the official narrative wasn't exactly correct, and they handle it well and maturely, then it's a good sign that the UFO topic will be handled with more transparency. But on the other hand, if we just get a bunch of obfuscation and nothing happens, then I don't think it's a good read on what's going to happen for UFOs. So, it's Kennedy right now is kind of like nothing to do with UFOs and yet everything to do with UFOs at the moment.
It's funny you say that, and I think it's very telling. It almost rewinds us some 60 years because I think there were two key events in the 1960s that fractured the trust in the US government, particularly by people of a conspiratorial and a UFO bent. And one of them was the Warren Commission report, the investigation into the assassination of JFK. And people who were suspicious did not buy that at all, and they thought it was a complete whitewash. Now, 5 or so years after that, or 6 or so years after that, there is, of course, the Condon Committee. The University of Colorado does its investigation into the UFO phenomenon after kind of being pressured the Air Force being pressured by Congress, being headed by Gerald Ford, of all people at the time, was kind of one of the motive forces behind that, was that nobody trusted the Air Force. So let's hand it over to a public university that we can trust. And so it went to the University of Colorado with Edward Condon at the head of that. And then we could talk about this forever, but it seemed clear that the Condon Committee did not act in good faith. So you had these double whammy to perhaps people primarily interested in the Kennedy assassination, which blew out into a broader conspiratorial tale, being let down by the Warren Commission, and then half a dozen years after that, the University of Colorado let them down with the Condon Committee and the Condon Commission's report regarding UFOs. And I think both of those things almost set the tone for conspiracy and UFO thought up until today. So it's interesting that now you're like the bellwether for what's happening, what's going to come next with UFO law is what's happening now with the JFK, files, because that's exactly, if we retrace it back to the 60s, where so much of this suspicion of the US government and that they're not telling.
You missed one, of course, right? You missed one. You missed, right? So we have 3 high profile assassinations in the 60s. We have John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and MLK all get shot, and then we have the moon landing, and that in itself is it's like this giant. There's a huge number of people that don't entirely believe the moon landing.
Yeah.
And I think if we're talking about UFOs in the end of the 60s, we have to at least address, the question of the moon landing.
You're right.
One
this
way
all
or not.
ties in.
Yeah.
Because that's where John Keel, speaking about the veracity of the moon landing, much of the suspicion about that is because Kubrick did 2001: A Space Odyssey and supposedly had the technology to shoot a fake moon landing. Like, that was a popular conspiracy theory. But John Keel draws out his idea about the Black Tower, this allegory of this other intelligence pumping us full of information to drive us, crazy or control our consciousness. He pulls that from 2001 as well. So there's this weird circular, all of these things are interconnected. It's like a Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Sheen novel. I don't know if you've ever read Illuminatus, but it's all of these things. It's not that that's what it's about, but the idea that we live in this kind of synchronistic universe where all of this weirdness is connected and you can never find a way out.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that because I haven't read it. But I mean, in regards to sort of the moon landing kind of questions, I think it's there is reason to question some of it. I actually don't have an opinion enough on it. I thought it was a settled science for a very long time, and then recently, there is a lot of things that are kind of miraculous because they made just incredible strides in the last 6 months. You have James Webb, the leader of NASA, who is the one who really championed the moon landing to Kennedy, told Kennedy, literally, we can do it. And then he quits 6 months before because 3 astronauts have just died on the trial takeoff, brutally burned alive. It was a horrible day. And they're hundreds of millions of dollars over budget. And they're basically just doing this to show the world, yeah, we can do it. And so it doesn't it just feels like if there was an easy button, if I was in a leadership role and there was an easy button that was fake it and don't kill any more of our astronauts, it would be very tempting. I could see how someone might be interested in pushing such an easy button. That's all I'm going to say about that.
And then that ties into Werner von Braun as well, of course, the idea that our rocket scientist is somehow our head, essentially our default head of NASA, the person who brings us this technology from Nazi Germany, somehow is involved in a UFO cover-up as well at Roswell and all of these other things. And so again, it turns into this synchronistic. You can't escape where is the actual truth. It's so strange. And the problem is you go down these rabbit holes and consensus reality just evaporates. And I'm not saying I don't think we went to the moon. I'm not saying any of this stuff, but I am saying that the more you look at it, the more these things intertwine, the more suspicious and the easier it is to become suspicious of any type of consensus reality. Wasn't there a Hollywood movie recently made about the fake? What was that called?
I don't know if I'm familiar with this one. I'm sorry.
No, there was a new one made recently. And I want to say that, I'm trying to remember who are the stars. There was a Hollywood movie made recently. They had a side plan about if the moon landing didn't work, and it was a big budget, proper Hollywood movie. If the moon landing didn't work, that they had this kind of backup fake moon landing in process, this alternative history.
Sure, sure.
I
Yeah,
can't. I haven't seen it. I just saw the. I literally just saw the trailers and I went, "That's really clever."
yeah.
Rewriting history. Maybe popular culture has rewritten history, though. Maybe the X-Files and Dark Skies and all these other things rewrote what we all believe now. Anyway.
I mean, one of the best ways to kind of get to the bottom of things like this is, I mean, conspiracies always fester when it's obvious people are lying to us, you know, and what going back to, you know, the beginning of this year where Trump clearly lied to us about the drones. Like when it's an obvious lie that it's so insulting, and that's what breeds these conspiracies, and that's what erodes people's trust in their institutions. Is don't lie to us like that. It would literally just be better to say that they're Chinese incursions and we're fighting them off or something, and we don't want to talk about it. But just don't lie to us in such an obvious and profound way. And when you do that, then people have to go, well, what else are they lying about? Are they lying about these other hallmarks? Because eventually you start to just wonder. Like if you're going to lie to me about easily provable things, you're probably going to lie to me about more difficult things.
Of course. And I think that the trouble is, what party do you look to? Because we had the similar lies under the Biden administration beforehand,
Sure.
which Trump was able to kind of come in and say, well, we know that they're lying, and they clearly were, and they changed the conversation as Trump got loud about it. So maybe we live in this space where there's nobody trustworthy. And the movie, by the way, was called Fly Me to the Moon, with
Oh, okay.
Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum, which was about this alternative moon landing
I'm writing it
plan.
down right now.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. You know, speaking, and this is entirely off topic, but I watched with my girlfriend Samantha, who you've met the other night, and I hadn't seen it. I've been holding off to watch it I hadn't been holding off intentionally. I just never had a chance to watch it. I finally had a chance to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't watched it, the Tarantino movie. But I love movies that rewrite history and give us a better version. And have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I haven't.
It's fantastic. But that's my recommendation to any adult watching this now, to see an alternative version of 1960s American history.
Oh, interesting.
But that's the strength of being a filmmaker. We were going to talk about pyramid stories. I don't know if you can hang around for another. We're over time now, but maybe that's something we can.
I can talk a little bit about that. I had to write this down because it was slightly technical. So if you don't know about it, so the two not UFO stories has been Kennedy, as we already mentioned, and the pyramids. So there was an Italian team of scientists that recently went into the pyramids. This is maybe 5-6 days ago. And they released their findings that there are these gigantic structures underneath the pyramids. I mean, we're talking about structures that are larger than the Empire State Building. We're talking about if we're talking about like to scale, like this would be like 10 times the size of the pyramid going straight down. Now, they used a new method called SAR, which is synthetic Doppler tomography. And there's a lot of images of this on Twitter about artist renderings and the actual raw data. My official take on this is this is such a profound story. If true, it would rewrite much of human history. It would mean that the level of technology of the Egyptians would be centuries beyond what we thought they were, maybe even a millennia beyond, maybe even beyond our current technology to be able to build something so advanced. And it's just it's very weird. And I have to be skeptical because yes, you have one team of scientists and yes, they've published their data, but something of this nature really needs to be verified by lots more sources, lots more broader scientific community. And so I'm very skeptical of this. So I haven't been really talking much about it, but it's still an interesting thing because the pyramids have always been, they have captivated the imagination of people for millennia. They really have. And I read this fact about the pyramids I thought was interesting, was that during Cleopatra's reign, there was already a well-established tourism industry around seeing the pyramids.
Get out of town.
Not even kidding. I promise it's true. That's how old the pyramids are. That's how long they fascinated humanity. So I mean, a story like this, is just one in a million stories over thousands of years of how exciting and how fascinating the pyramids are. And they probably always will be. In another 1,000 years, we'll still be talking about the pyramids. I guarantee it. So, yeah.
It's crazy that if there is something which suggests the pyramids are older and bigger and weirder than we've ever thought, because of course that goes straight into the realm of the Shaver mystery as well, that these antediluvial civilizations were far more technologically advanced than we ever could have imagined. So I'm sure if Richard Shaver was still alive today, he'd be saying, I told you, boys.
He probably would. He seems to be really ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
One funny thing, which I don't think this is necessarily real at all, but you've probably seen it. Most of our audience have probably seen it on. Occasionally, it certainly pops up in my feed on Facebook. Is the idea that Devil's Tower, the iconic, rock mass from Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Sure,
it kind of looks like the base of a tree stump which has been cut off, and it was a giant tree. I don't know if you've seen that on Facebook. It pops up in my Facebook all the time. There's this theory that there used to be these enormous trees, and Devil's Tower in Wyoming is somehow a tree stump of this giant tree.
There's rock formations all over the United States where people think they see things. There's one in Arizona that supposedly is hands praying, and it doesn't really look like hands praying. And people and they built a Catholic church there that they're so convinced that it's hands praying. Wow. So people see things in rocks, whether it's real to them, and that's all that matters, right? So that's all that matters.
But I don't think Devil's Tower is really an ancient gigantic tree, but it has circulated on socials in the last 5 years or so. But you know who came up with that originally? Richard Shaver in a June 1947 issue of Amazing Stories. Literally, that's where it came from. Nobody
really
goes, Richard Shaver, but it became popular again. Photos of it from above. This is, the ancient world and these giant tree stumps. So there's been a number of times Shaver would have felt that some of his, even his more extreme ideas had been validated by the modern audience. And the new pyramids thing would just be another thing. If he was still alive, he'd be talking to Ray Palmer and being, see, I told you.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Happy days. But tell us again, it's so great to always chat to you. And this, man, it went fast tonight. We're already like an hour and 6 minutes in. But tell us, how do people actually, and again, I'll have a link to your YouTube channel in the show notes anyway, that people can just go to and click through to. But tell us, for just the people who are just listening and might not go or just watching and might not go and click on that, how can people find your wonderful videos?
Sure. Yeah. I post my content on YouTube under Alien Wisconsin, and we're also on Facebook as Alien Wisconsin. That's probably the best way to reach me. alienwisco@gmail.com if you have a story or want to contact me directly. And I will, of course, be at most of the major UFO events in Wisconsin this year as well. Definitely going to be going back to Elmwood. There's a lot to talk about. That could be a whole nother day, some other time. So, but yeah, Alien Wisconsin on YouTube.
We should have you back on, and we should get to hang out at one of these in the near future UFO events as well in Wisconsin, because it's both of our state. Yeah,
absolutely. I'd be down for that.
Man, it was great having you. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
It's always great. You have a good night. Bye, everyone.
Until I get to talk to you again, Ian, until I get to talk to everybody else out there, please keep it weird.